What's going on, everybody? This is John J Gaming on the mic here, coming at you with a brand new episode of the NCSL Dynasty as seen on College Football Revamp within NCAA 14. Last episode, we went through the college football playoff, and it was certainly an exciting college football playoff, one in which saw the USC Trojans ultimately winning that prize that every team wants, and that is indeed a national championship. However, this episode we will go off the field and we will check out some movement in off-season. It's going to be a fun off-season for you guys playing today. I'm going to show you guys the All-Americans as well as award winners, some stat leaders who had the most passing yards, rushing yards, etc. Big movement in regards to what happens in the coaching carousel to go with that as well. And then, of course, some of the notable guys that are leaving their programs and moving on to the NFL. So, gonna be a fun-filled episode, and at the very end, there's information on how you can get more involved in this series as well, in terms of being a custom player or a custom coach as well. So you're going to want to stick around to the very end. That being said, we got a very exciting episode on your hands here today, and if you guys are ready for it, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button for me, hit that subscribe button as well. If you do happen to be brand new to the channel, let's go ahead and dive right into the off-season action. So we get the off-season edition of the NCSL underway by taking a look at the coaches' top 25 poll to end bowl season. And not a lot, we all know who was going to be number one, right? USC was going to be the number one team in the country. They had a perfect 16-0, right? But as for the rest of the top 25, there's some interesting surprises in here. For example, Minnesota is number 3 in the final poll. They gave USC a really good game, some good fight there in the national semifinal. Georgia moves down a couple of spots as well, and they lost to Ohio State in the first round. Shoot, even Texas. Texas was a top 5 team in the country, and they weren't even in the college football playoff. It was a tough break for Texas for sure. As for other surprises, we've got Nebraska at number 4. We have UCLA at number 8 in the country. They move up following a Las Vegas Bowl win versus BYU. As for the other top 25, we got Hawaii at number 9 in the country. It was a great season for the Rainbow Warriors. But what's going to happen to Chris Gentry? He's a custom coach. He might be looking to move to a bigger program here in the offseason. That's something to watch out for. The defending national champions finished number 10 in the country. Michigan, following their win in the Gasparilla Bowl, they finished number 11 in the nation. And then you also have Colorado State finishing their year with an amazing bowl win against Notre Dame. They move up to number 12. A great season for Colorado State. Meanwhile, Penn State falls to 13 in the country. They did lose in the first round of college football playoff to USC, but they had the worst margin of defeat in the playoff. Washington moves up a few spots after winning against Virginia Tech in the Holiday Bowl. Rutgers also moving up a few spots as well, fellow Conference USA school. Rutgers gets in at number 15 in the entire nation. They won against New Mexico in the Hawaii Bowl. As for Alabama, they lost to Texas in that Citrus Bowl against the Longhorns. Clemson moves up a few spots as they beat Rice in the First Responders Bowl. Speaking of those ranked teams, Florida moves down 5 spots after a loss to Michigan in the Gasparilla Bowl. Arkansas moves up to number 19 in the country. They blow out Tennessee in the Quick Lane Bowl. As for LSU, they move up to number 20 as they handle their business against Washington State. And rounding out your top 25, we got South Alabama, who sneaks in at number 21 in the country. Rice at 22. Florida State gets in at number 23 in the country. And your last 2 spots go to Virginia Tech at 24. And the Oregon Ducks, who do squeeze in at number 25 in the country. And that does mean that Charlotte, BYU, and the Warhawks of Louisiana Monroe, they do all happen to fall out of the top 25 in the final major game action of the year. So after we finished taking a look at the AP Top 25 to finish the year, let's now go into the awards as well as the All-Americans here in the second season of the NCSL. And we now look towards the Heisman Trophy, the biggest honor in all of college football. And this year, Jared McBride will be taking home the Heisman Trophy. He's a senior redshirt in his final year of college eligibility. A speed guy out of Belle Chasse, Louisiana. Well, after being mainly on the bench for the last few years, he finally gets a shot, and boy, did he bring home quite a few awards. Jared McBride not only wins the Heisman Trophy, but he also wins the Walter Camp and the Doak Walker Award as well. And it was an electric season. He finished literally 1 yard shy of 2,000 yards on the year. That does also include 15 rushing touchdowns as well. He was a guy that made a lot of guys miss as well. 138 broken tackles as well. Very impressive for 386 carries. Has one of the highest broken tackle percentage in the entire country. Not to mention he also caught a significant number of passes out of the backfield as well. 42 receptions, almost 400 yards, and 2 touchdowns as well to finish out the season for Jared McBride. Now, he was an 89 overall, so we'll see if he does make it to the NFL, but Jared McBride was a very good college player, to say the least. Other guys that were receiving Heisman Trophy consideration, this was really the year of the running back. We have Brian Brandt, the senior redshirt out of Culpeper, Virginia. He was representing for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Tim Hayden, a sophomore. Yes, just a sophomore out of the University of Nebraska. He's from Converse, Texas. He might try to declare, and we'll see if he actually does that or not. Justin Fawerda also in here, a true sophomore. So he has at least one more year before he can even declare in the first place. He finishes 4th in the final Heisman Trophy race. And then at number 5, we have Casey Carter, another Miami Hurricane. This one from Titusville, Florida. He's a senior redshirt, and I believe he was in that Heisman Trophy conversation last year, but didn't ultimately get it done. As for other award winners as well, let's go ahead and dive right into it here. We have Casey Carter being the winner of the Maxwell Award this year. Casey Carter, like I said, finished 5th place in the Heisman Trophy conversation. And while he took a little bit of a step back this year, he was more efficient and did take better care of the football this year. He only threw 9 interceptions off of 23 touchdown passes, and his completion percentage was higher than what it was last year. And keep in mind, these stats were despite the fact that Miami played in 2 less games than what they did last year because they were bounced earlier in the college football playoff. Casey Carter, someone who was extraordinarily aware of what he was doing on the football field. We'll see if Casey Carter can make it to the NFL. I think he has a really good shot of doing just that. As for the Bednarik Award, that is going to go to Antoine Chambers. Antoine Chambers is a true junior from Arcadia, California, and played his college football this past season with the USC Trojans. Antoine Chambers was a guy that just was all over the field for USC. He also wins the Nagurski Award as well. This is a guy who also sat on the bench his true freshman and true sophomore years. But he remained patient. He didn't jump into the transfer portal, and he was rewarded heavily because of that. Over 100 tackles on the year with 7 sacks to his name. And also a guy that did a little bit of everything. Got an interception, got a defensive touchdown as well, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery to his name as well. One of the best defensive players in the entire country last season. He still has one more year of eligibility. We'll see if he does end up declaring for the NFL draft or not. But now we move over to the O'Brien Award, since the Nagurski went to the same player as it did for the, I believe it was not the, yeah, it was the Bednarik Award. I had to do a little discount double check real fast. This year, the O'Brien Award is going to go to the junior red shirt out of University of Georgia, Andre Bryant. He's from College Park, Georgia, so he is an in-state kid. And Andre Bryant had an excellent season as well. He ended up throwing for more than 4,000 yards through the air this past season, had 34 touchdowns, and his interceptions did decrease significantly. Somewhat a guy that really was a breakout player, as he did struggle through 2023 with nearly as many interceptions as he did touchdown passes, but it looks like he really took that to heart, really improved his completion percentage dramatically over the course of this past season. Not to mention he was a decent threat on the ground as well. While he did have very many yards per carry, only had 1.5 yards, he did also find the end zone 7 times on the ground as well. So this is a kid that did a little bit of everything, or at least was a willing runner, even though Andre Bryant here was a little bit more than a, he's more of a pocket passer, more of that traditional quarterback that you would see at the NFL level. Andre Bryant also having an electric season and did lead Georgia to the college football playoff largely because of that. Up next is the Blitnikoff Award, because we did see the Doak Walker Award go to the Jerry McBride of the University of Miami. This is the Blitnikoff Awards, which goes to the best wide receivers in college football. Zach Grigsby is going to bring it home, also from the University of Georgia as well. This guy is a senior redshirt from Dalton, Georgia, and just an excellent season for this young man right here. Played in 4 years, but this was his best season yet. 96 catches for over 1,500 yards receiving over the course of the season. He also had 16 touchdowns. That's more touchdowns than what he had in his first 3 years on campus, which his first 3 years weren't truly that bad either. He actually had good production those first 3 years. Dude was electric, man. Dude was absolutely almost impossible to guard, as he had over 100 yards per game. That was his average, and he also did a little bit something on the ground too. 8 carries, 30 yards as well. Definitely deserving of the Blitnikoff. Someone who we should expect to see play on Sundays as well, as this was a kid that was absolutely fun to watch on Sundays. He's going to have elite speed, and I'm sure that's going to translate right away at the NFL level. We'll see what he can do and where he ends up being drafted when that year 2 NCSL class is actually created. That is going to be built as we're putting the finishing touches on year 1 right now for the Madden series that is going to be attached to this NCSL Dynasty now that Madden 24 is out. But a great season for Zach Grigsby. And quick shout out as well to Vincent Montgomery. He was coached by Thomas Hammock Jr. 130 catches, 1,800 yards, 16 touchdowns as well, but finishes in second place. As for the Mackey Award, we go down up to the Bluegrass State as we go to Western Kentucky, where Adam Payne is going to bring home the John Mackey Award this year. And oh boy, did Western Kentucky, they certainly love their tight ends. Doug Rose, first year as the offensive coordinator, I'm sure he's extremely excited about that, as Adam Payne had an excellent season from the tight end position. Really a breakout year for him, as he never had more than 600 yards in a season. And this kid was the centerpiece of the offense this year. While Western Kentucky, we didn't see them in bowl game action, they're certainly an interesting team to watch this year, as Adam Payne was a guy that had 14 touchdowns over the course of the season and 1,800 yards receiving as well. He was, really just had that breakout moment. So congratulations to Adam Payne on winning the John Mackey Award because of that. It will be interesting to see if he does get NFL looks. He is a little bit on the low side at the moment, as he is only an 84 overall, and this was his last year of eligibility too. As for the Outwin Trophy, that goes to the best offensive lineman in the country, and I believe it goes to it's straight up the best offensive lineman. Tony Robertson was him. He was straight up that guy this season. The senior out of USC, he was from Dade City, Florida. He did not allow a single sack the entire season, but he did pack up a lot of pancakes while he owns his own breakfast place. 47 pancakes on the year. he was piling them up and he was laying them down. So an excellent year for Tony Robertson. And if I'm not mistaken, that's a burp, so that's really sexy. He's the only guy on this list that didn't allow us. Well, Ray Washington is a notable obsession, but he didn't even have nearly as many pancakes. I do want to point out that the FCS transfer Courtney Smith also did a pretty good job as well. 6'2 pancakes and 3 sacks as well. The former FCS player did finish third in the Outland Trophy race too. Now, as for the Remington, I'm sure we're not surprised here that the Remington is going to go to Tony Robinson as well. These goes to the best centers in the entire country. For the Lombardi, again, it's going to go to Chad Walden. I'm pretty sure that did he win this award last year? No, but I'm pretty sure it was another Miami guy. It might have been Stanley Jones. Yeah, so Stanley Jones, his teammate, doesn't win it this year. He did win the Nagurski and the Lombardi last year. But his teammate Chad Walden, who's a senior redshirt, he actually is going to win it again this year. But Miami gets 3 of their top 4 guys in here this year. But more on Chad Walden here. Chad Walden was a guy that stepped up even more this year. Because while he didn't have nearly as many sacks as he did last year, he only had 8 sacks, which still was a lot of production, don't get me wrong. Last year he had 16. He deflected more passes. He had more tackles as well. And was just a very productive player the last 2 years that he was able to get on the field. Chad Walden will be coming in as a 91 overall, and surely will be a guy that will be interesting to watch out for, as we'll see if he does end up getting some NFL consideration. For a Butkus Award, that goes to the best linebacker in the country, and that will be awarded to Jeff Campbell, the junior redshirt out of University of Wisconsin. Hailing from Chicago Heights, Illinois, Jeff Campbell was a guy that really stepped up his productivity this past season, tripled his tackles. He had 77 tackles on the year. Also he was a one-man nightmare for opposing offenses and for particularly other offensive coordinators as well. Had 2 interceptions, which pretty solid for a linebacker, but also 4 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries too. Dude was a guy that just flew all around the football field. And the scary part is, he has another year of college eligibility if he chooses to remain at the University of Wisconsin, or could he try his hand at the NFL, as he is in that 90 overall range, which would put him in the conversation for having a realistic chance of making it to the league. So now we go to the Jim Forte Award, which goes to the best corner in all of college football. And this year, Nick Allen is going to bring it home from the Ohio State University. Hailing from Brooklyn, Ohio, Nick Allen was the soul of the Ohio State defense, a defense that almost won the national championship this year. They finish up as the runners-up, but an excellent season for Nick Allen, though, in his final college season, as he ended up with 85 tackles, 7 TFLs, did only have 1 sack this year, but had 4 interceptions. He was nothing short of a ball hawk, and what kind of had a lot of Sean Taylor in him as well, as he was also able to force 3 fumbles as well, plus a block kick. You know how hard it is to get a block kick in NCAA 14? It's extraordinarily rare. So congratulations to Nick Allen for actually being able to accomplish that. He is a certified bad man, and I'm looking forward to see what NFL team calls for his services when the NFL draft comes around. He was absolutely electric. So quickly, we'll go through the kicker and punters awards. For kickers, it's going to go to Tremaine Parham, the junior out of the University of Michigan, all the way from Belgrade, Montana. Dude went from Montana to Michigan to kick a football through some uprights, and he was really good at it. 35 for 42 on the year. He made almost all of his extra points as well. Plus, he's got another year of eligibility to go with it as well. One of your custom guys, custom coaches, will be represented in this list as well, is John Brown, the kicker out of Hawaii. He's only a sophomore, by the way. He finishes 18 for 22 on his field goals this year, so you'll have to see him make it onto this Grozo Award finalist list. Now, as for the Kyle Guy Award, that's going to go to the senior punter from Ohio State, Mario Watson from Rocky River, Ohio. had a punt net average of 41 yards, but did a pretty good job of downing those punts. He had 14 inside the 20 this past season. Excellent year, and while these punters did some good stuff this year overall, really excited to see the diversity on this list. But congratulations to Mario Watson on winning the Kyle Guy Award. And then finally, the Jet Award goes to the best return man in all college football. And the most dynamic return man in the eyes of the national media was Jake Shaw out of Bowling Green. Bowling Green getting a little bit of love. They had a big-time bowl win in the Military Bowl against Boston College. Almost 1,400 kick return yards here in this one. 2 touchdowns on the year. And he's an absolute speed demon as well. Look out for him possibly in year number 3 to get some NFL attention depending on what he works on. But Jake Shaw was a pretty dangerous player overall, as I accidentally jumped out of that screen. Not only did he have all of those return yards, but also carried the rock a decent amount of times, and when called upon, he had 6 yards to carry too. Seems like a very complete player, and I'm sure Bowling Green is going to be pretty excited to have him back, as he should actually be back for his senior season. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the All-Americans that were announced for year number 2, some of which you have already seen from various award races, but one that we didn't necessarily see is the junior redshirt Ben Scott. Ben Scott had an excellent year captaining the Trojan offense. The Hayesville, Kansas native is going to be your first team All-American at the quarterback position. We also have Brian Brandt at running back for Ohio State. He was a runner-up for the Heisman Trophy. Adam Williams, I believe, was also in that conversation as well. He's a speed guy for the University of Georgia. He's from Statesboro, Georgia as well. Zach Grigsby, the Blenikoff Award winner, is one of your wide receivers, which another wide receiver in Vincent Montgomery, he also is on that first team All-American list. And we have the best tight end award winner, the winner of the John Mackey, Adam Payne, also named to that first team All-American. Now, as we go into the offensive line at the first team All-Americans are Tyrone Wesley out of the University of Georgia, Joni Robinson, the best offensive lineman in the country. He's there for USC. At right guard, you got Chris Carter out of Ole Miss. He's a senior. The FCS transfer, Courtney Smith, also in here representing the University of Georgia now. And rounding out your offensive line is Jason Tate, the senior out of USC. As for the defensive players, we see Stanley Jones, a true sophomore. We saw him get some love as a true freshman. Stanley Jones gets in as a true sophomore this year, though. Nolan Scott on the other side of the for the defensive end, so he's a senior from Ohio State. As for the defensive tackles, Chad Walden, who is your Lombardi Award winner from the University of Miami, he gets in. And we have Scott Morris, the senior out of the University of Tennessee, hailing from Cape Girardeau, Missouri. That's the home of Southeast Missouri State, by the way. He gets in as the final defensive lineman on the first team All-American list. Now, for the linebackers, we have PJ Rutledge, who was a true freshman this year. This is a true freshman making it as a first team All-American. He was a day one impact for the Buckeyes defense, so you love to see that. We also have Josh O'Neal, the senior out of Covington, Louisiana. He's there for the University of Texas. And rounding out your linebackers is Antoine Chambers, considered the best defensive player in college football. Antoine Chambers, of course, is from USC. Now, rounding out the group of first-team All-Americans is your DBs. And at DB, we got Eric Collins, the senior out of USC. Perry Bradenby Jr. out of Georgia. He's from Darlington, South Carolina. Then at your safeties, you got Erwin Gutierrez from Dodge City, Kansas. A lot of Kansas love here for Gutierrez. He's a junior at USC. And then Nick Allen, who is your Jim Forpay Award winner. And of course, we got Tremaine Parham, the winner of the Groza, and Mario Watson, the winner of the Kyle Guy Award. And actually getting the returner, first team returner, goes to David Massey. He's a sophomore redshirt from Swartz, Texas. He played his college football this past season. for the Texas Longhorns. But now for the second team All-Americans, and the second team All-American group is dramatically different actually. For starters, we have Chase Ingram, the junior redshirt out of the University of Texas. He's from Perrington, Texas, and could be declaring for the NFL draft depending on whether he wants to stay for one more year or not. Jared McBride, the Heisman Trophy winner, is named second team All-American as well, alongside fellow junior running back Nick Richard from Paramount, California, who played his college football at USC. As for your receivers for this year, we have Landon Curtis, the senior out of the University of Texas. Brandon Burks, the junior out of Pritchard, Alabama, played at Ohio State this past fall and gets that other NCAA All-American slot. Then at tight end, you got Danny Hart, the sophomore redshirt out of Lewistown, Montana, playing at Boise State this year. He will be named second team All-American and has a couple more years of eligibility remaining. Now, as for the offensive line on the second team, guys, you got Kevin Yates out of Georgia. He's a senior in his last year of eligibility. Johnny Anderson, a senior out of Ole Miss. He's from Eustis, Florida. Mike Anderson, the senior redshirt out of the University of Texas. He's from Castro Valley, California. Ray Washington, the senior out of White River Junction, Vermont. Don't see a lot of Vermont love very often, but an exception was certainly made here. And your last offensive lineman named onto the All-American list is Clint Collier, the senior redshirt out of the University of Nebraska. He's from Homer, Louisiana. Now on to the defensive guys, and starting out, we have our defensive line. We got Drew Robinson, the junior out of the University of Georgia, but he will be joined by Preston Scales, the senior redshirt out of Coral Springs, Florida. He plays college football this past year at the University of Miami, at the U. For your interior defensive lineman, you got Alex Wallace, the senior redshirt for the Texas Longhorns. And your other defensive tackle, another true freshman, making it onto the All-American list, one of the 5 stars, and Tom Newman, a true freshman from Colonia, New Jersey. He played at USC and made a pretty big impact in his first year of college football. He had 10 sacks as a true freshman. He's going to be a problem until he decides to go for the NFL draft, if that is what interested him. Now, for linebackers, you got Jeff Campbell, the junior redshirt out of Wisconsin. He is your Butkus Award winner, going to the best linebacker in the entire country. He played for the Wisconsin Badgers. Your other linebackers include Matt Harrison out of the University of Alabama, a senior hailing from North Marysville, Washington, and Nate Spurlock, another Alabama's linebacker, a Alabama home guy as well, who is a senior redshirt. Now going on to the DBs for the second team All-American list. You have Turian McGrew, a junior from USC, hailing from Rosemead, California. The other corner going to Tony Ferguson, a senior out of Sebring, Florida. He played for the U in his final year of college football eligibility. And then your safeties include Justin Bell, the true sophomore out of Douglasville, Georgia, who made a big impact on that Crimson Tide defense. And of course, Jay Hollis is here as well, a senior out of the University of Texas. He's from Donaldsville, Louisiana. For the kickers, that goes to Keenan Lewis, a true freshman out of the University of Georgia. He hails from Anniston, Alabama. And your second team All-American punter is a sophomore from USC, William Moore from Paducah, Kentucky. That is, don't hear that name very often, but I'm sure Paducah, Kentucky is very proud. And that returner award goes to Jake Shaw, who ended up winning the Jet Award. He's a junior redshirt from Bowling Green. But now we are going to take a quick peek to see what your NCAA leaders were from a statistical standpoint before we jump into that coaching carousel, which is my personal favorite of the offseason is that coaching carousel. So we'll start with the NCAA passing leaders, and Ben Scott was your #1 passer in America this year. A first-team All-American, only one with over 5,000 yards passing. He threw for over 5,300 yards on the way to leading USC to the national championship. A couple of other guys in here as well, like Jermaine Keys, one of your custom coach representatives. Jermaine Keys threw for 4,200 yards as well and finished in second place. So very surprising to see that, given Northern Illinois runs that triple option with Thomas Hammock Jr. as the offensive coordinator. Now for runners, I'm not surprised to see it broken down the way that it is, with Jared Bryant being the one closest to 2,000 yards. I actually had 3 guys that were on the verge of running for 2,000 yards. There were 3 guys over 1,900 yards. Brian Britt was very close as well. He was 15 yards short. And Drew Brown from Tennessee had 1,930 yards too. So really the year of the running back here in year 2 of the NCSL. For your receivers, Vincent Montgomery actually led the NCAA in receiving yards. He had almost 1,850 yards on the year. Then Adam Payne, the tight end out of Western Kentucky, coached up by offensive coordinator Doug Rose. He also had over 1,800 yards receiving. So great job by those 2 players who represent their custom coaches pretty darn well. For tackling, 4 guys with over 100 tackles on the year, but Gutierrez ends up with the most solo tackles in the NCAA. Gutierrez had 105 solo tackles, but his teammate Antoine Chambers, well, he was right behind him with a smacking 104 solo tackles. As for sack leaders this year, we had quite a few guys that had double-digit sacks over the course of the entire season, but Coley out of Texas A&M led everybody in the FBS level, that upper echelon of Division I football, as Coley had 13.5 sacks to lead the NCAA. For interceptions, Smith out of Marshall actually led the entire group this year, as he led the NCAA with 8 interceptions. The dude from Marshall was nothing short of an absolute ball hawk. Although I don't remember Marshall being in a bowl game, he was certainly a bright spot for the Thundering Herd this season. And finally, for the NCAA kicking winners, it actually loaded up pretty quickly, surprisingly. Lawson, the kicker out of Rice, actually had the longest field goal of the season. He ended up kicking a 56-yard field goal, which was the longest that any kicker was successfully able to make. So if you guys need a little bit of a reminder of how the coaching carousels works in the NCSL offseason, what I'd like to do is I want to highlight all of the head coaching changes only for the NCSL coaching carousel portion of the offseason. The only exception I would make to that is if one of your guys' existing custom coaches do end up changing jobs as well, and if that is indeed the case, then I will highlight that as well, whether they end up being a head coach or if they remain as a coordinator. So the first head coaching job that we do have offered right now is the Navy head coaching position. The current head coach, Ken Niamatoyo, did retire at the age of 69, which is very nice. And we will go ahead and see who ends up getting that coordinator job. And it looks like Garrett Riley is going to be the new head coach at Navy. He was an offensive coordinator this past year at USC. It's going to be a completely different style of football at Navy moving forward, as he's going to bring the air raid offense to the Naval Military Academy. His alma mater is Texas Tech. Up next, we have another retiree, as Willie Fritz retires at the age of 74. The Twin Green Wave went 8-6 this past season, and that is also going to go to another USC coordinator, Brian Brown, the defensive coordinator at USC. He will take the head coaching job at Tulane, so a big revelation there as well. Seeing some retirees in the upper echelons of the coaching ranks, but Brian Brown should be a very good coach as well. He runs the pistol offense, and his alma mater is at Ole Miss, which is in the same conference that Tulane is in. As for South Carolina, their head coach, Shane Beamer, the Beamer ball does not work any longer in this Dynasty universe, so Shane Beamer does end up getting fired, and the coach that will end up replacing Shane Beamer, as South Carolina will be doing their coaching search, is the head coach of Toledo, Chad Staggs, who led Toledo to a 7-6 record this past season, and they are, of course, winners of the Duke's Mayo Bowl against Charlotte. He will now be at South Carolina, and it makes perfect sense why, as this is actually his alma mater. So Chad Staggs returned to the alma mater to bring South Carolina to its former glory. Up next is the Colorado State head coaching job, and it was an excellent season for Colorado State this past offseason. Colorado State went 11-2, but their coach Jay Norvell does end up retiring, so they are in need of a new head coach in Hawaii. Hawaii's head coaching opportunity does open up. Timmy Jang, who was a Hawaii graduate, it was his alma mater. Well, he bolts quickly. We just saw Timmy Jang take over this job after 1 year. He now leaves for Colorado State to bring that run and shoot offense, bringing them to the Colorado State Rams. So thanks to Timmy Jang leaving for Colorado State, the Hawaii head coaching position is now officially opened up, and it's going to be filled by Tommy Rees of the University of Texas. Had a great year at Texas, leading them to a 13-1 record. He will be taking over as the head coach of the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors. As for the Illinois Fighting Illini, Lauren Reggio has retired. So because of that retirement, that does mean that they are in need of a head coach once again. So Illinois will go ahead and jump into that coaching search, and after spending a little bit of time actually calling quite a few candidates, they will end up calling the head coach of Coastal Carolina, and Jamie Chadwell does accept the position. He led Coastal Carolina to an 8-5 record, and they do end up winning the Dax Slayer Gator Bowl against Temple during bowl season. He now goes to Illinois, and he brings his spread option offense and has Tennessee as his alma mater. But now we move forward to San Diego State, as they're looking for a head coach of their own. He was fired after failing to meet his goals this past season in a rough year for the Aztecs that saw San Diego State go 2-10. So now San Diego State will need a brand spanking new head coach, and they will end up going to the University of Georgia to hire defensive coordinator Rob Harley. Georgia went to the college football playoff, but was bounced in the first round. Had a very good year at Georgia, though, and he'll look to rebuild this Aztecs football team. Although his alma mater is at Ohio State, though, he does also bring that Tennessee spread option to the Aztecs for year number 3. As for the Memphis Tigers, Ryan Silverfield was fired after failing to meet his goals, and Memphis did only went 4-8 despite the fact that they did have a pretty explosive roster on paper. Now, George Gentry was offered a head coaching position at the University of Memphis. However, because I like to try to keep things realistic, we are actually not going to accept this, because you don't go from being a coordinator at a one-star school to a head coach at a bigger school, right? So we are actually going to decline this offer, and instead it's going to go to Kalani Sitake, the head coach of Tulsa. Tulsa, I believe, won their bowl game, if I'm not mistaken, but he's going to leave Tulsa in order to take this Memphis head coaching job. Up next, we have Oklahoma State, who just fired their head coach, James Franklin. He did end up failing to meet team goals, so Oklahoma State will look around to see who they want to go ahead and hire, and they're going to look towards some of these better coordinators, but they settle on Josh Henson. They believe that he was the best fit for the job. Auburn ended up winning the Wending Tree Bowl, and he was the offensive coordinator on that team. He'll look to try to rebuild the brand of Oklahoma State football, as they're just a one-star school. He is an Oklahoma State grad, though, so hopefully that means he gets a little bit more leeway moving forward. So now, the Toledo head coaching job is now open, and we did end up seeing the Toledo head coach depart. Wanted to go ahead and do a discount double check real fast here to see where the he went to South Carolina. So Chad Staggs is now there at South Carolina. So that means Toledo needs a head coach once again, and they're gonna get the offensive coordinator out of Clemson, Brandon Streeter. He was on a 5-year contract. Brandon Streeter, very good job at Clemson this past season, as Clemson ended up going 11-3. They beat Virginia Tech in the bowl game, which is a big win for Clemson. They're also champions. No, they didn't beat Virginia Tech. They beat Rice in the First Responders Bowl. I remember that now. They are champions of the ACC, however. So I think this is going to be a very good hire that Brandon Streeter got right here. I think it's going to continue to elevate Toledo football. But now Tulsa is in need of a new head coach as well, given that Kalani Sitake left to take the head coaching job at the University of Memphis. And what Tulsa decides to do is they'll bring in Billy Napier, who was the offensive coordinator for Nebraska this past season. Nebraska making it to the college football playoff, but they were bounced ultimately by their own conference mates in Minnesota. They happen to be paired next to each other. He will now be the head coach of the Tulsa Golden Hurricanes, as he brings his one-back offensive play system to Tulsa, as they look to continue to build off of being runners-up of the Big 12 this past season. For Coastal Carolina, Jamie Chadwell, because he left to take the head coaching job at Illinois, they are in need of a new head coach once again. And for Coastal Carolina, they're going to bring in the head coach of UTEP, Terry Franklin. UTEP lost to Hawaii in the bowl game. However, what Terry Franklin was able to do was that he was able to go ahead and actually have UTEP ranked in the top 25 at some point. Got a big-time win against Texas, the only team that was able to do that. So a great hire here as Coastal Carolina looks to continue to build off of its positive momentum, beating Temple in the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl. Ohio, meanwhile, will also need a head coach because Scotty Houston was fired after failing to meet his goals. And what does the Ohio Bobcats decide to do? They will contact offensive coordinator from Colorado State, Joe Moorhead. Part of that Colorado State staff last year, and it was a great staff at Colorado State. Moorhead will be tasked with building up the Ohio Bobcats, as they had a pretty rough year in the Big Ten, finishing only with a record of 3-9. Speaking of programs that need some serious help, Virginia also could use some help as well, as they only went 3-9 last year. And because of that, Zach Spicito was fired because of that, and they will hire the head coach from Memphis, Ryan Silverfield, who was also fired from the Memphis Tigers this past season. But he is a graduate from the University of Virginia, though. For USF, they will also look to get a head coach of its own, as they fired Will Hall after a 2-10 season. Again, George Gentry, a hot name on the market, but George Gentry will be looking to go to a bigger school that does happen to need an offensive coordinator. Like I said, I did want to keep it more realistic. Instead, Clay Helton is going to be hired as the head coach of BYU. He was an offensive coordinator at BYU last year. He brings a spread offense as well, and BYU was actually in the top 25 going in the bowl season. Barely lost to UCLA to finish the year. So a good hire here by USF to turn their program around in the SEC. Also needing a head coach is SMU. Elijah Dinklage was fired after failing to meet his goals. George Gentry not trying to go here. This is a dumpster fire. Instead, Alex Atkins will be taking the challenge. He was the offensive coordinator for the Seminoles of Florida State. He is an SMU alumni, so hopefully Alex Atkins gets some time to rebuild SMU, as they only went 3-9 last year. It was a rough go. For Central Michigan, meanwhile, Scott Saturday was fired after failing to meet his goals, only going 3-9 this past season, and Central Michigan will opt to get the former coach out of South Carolina, Shane Beamer. He'll be looking to try to rebuild his branding after he did end up getting fired at South Carolina, but I would argue that Central Michigan, it's harder to win there than in South Carolina. So Shane Beamer going to have a challenge on his hands. We'll see if he can do it. So with UTEP in need of a brand new head coach, we did see their head coach leave to take the head coaching job at Coastal Carolina. They went to the coaching carousel to look for a head coach of their own, and they grabbed Tim Lager. He was the offensive coordinator for Rutgers this past season, led Rutgers to a good 9-4 record, and Rutgers was ranked in the top 25 as well, which is very good by Rutgers standards. UTEP had a very good season last year, even though there wasn't a lot of talent on paper. We'll see if Tim Lager can continue to build off of that, as they're now a program that's on the map a little bit because of this past season. But the Nebraska offensive coordinator position was open, and George Gentry is going to take a look at this contract. I mean, in the 2 years that we have had this NCSL series, Nebraska has been very good. 12-2 over the course of each of the last 2 seasons. This is a very good position to take, and I think it makes sense for Nebraska to bring in George Gentry and continue to be this high-flying offense and be one of the best programs in the nation. So congratulations to George Gentry, who is going to go from Hawaii. He is now going to be the offensive coordinator of the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and that could put him in a very good spot. If Nebraska makes the college football playoff once again, we could absolutely see George Gentry get a head coaching job next offseason. But now we shift back over to the head coaching search, as Eastern Carolina will be looking for a new head coach. Now that we know that Charles Huff was fired after a 2-10 season, the Eastern Carolina Pirates will hire the former head coach of San Diego State, John Rudzinski, who also went 2-10. So a little bit of a head scratcher with Eastern Carolina not having the same resources that San Diego State has, and he couldn't make it work at San Diego State. So very confused by this decision, but he will be the head coach of the Eastern Carolina Pirates nonetheless. Speaking of schools that don't have as much resources, Northwestern needs a new head coach as well, as Andy Avalos was fired after failing to meet his goals for over the course of this past season. Because of that, Northwestern will be looking for a new head coach, and they'll hire the former coach of Ohio in Scotty Hazelton, who looked to rebrand himself a little bit. Kind of the same head-scratching decision that we saw earlier. Northwestern is in extremely rough shape as well. We'll see if it can be turned around, but it's not going to be easy, and I don't know if Scotty Hazelton is the right man for the job either. So the Duke Blue Devils, meanwhile, will be looking for a head coach as well. Andy Kotelnicki was fired. He failed to meet his goals. He was later hired to be the offensive coordinator at the University of Pittsburgh. One of your guys' custom coaches is in consideration. He's already on the staff here. William McNair. We'll see if they hire him, and they actually do. Wow. This dude was the defensive coordinator of Duke. I thought for sure he was a guy that's going to be fired, but William McNair instead is going to become the head coach of the Duke Blue Devils. And this is realistic because he's already on the staff anyways. So William McNair is going to be your first custom coach to become a head coach. I mean, really unexpected to see Duke go in this particular direction. Because they're 3-9, I thought it was going to be as good as fired, but that just hasn't happened. It's just really It's really strange that they went in this direction, but hey, if that's what they wanted to do, that's how they're going to do it. Meanwhile, the Ball State Cardinals, who actually were one of the worst teams in the entire country this past season, they only went 1-11. So rightfully so that they ended up firing Mike New because of that. But the million-dollar question is, who is their new head coach going to be? And they end up choosing the defensive coordinator out of Tulsa, Benny Martin, which, not a bad choice, even though he may not be very well known of a name necessarily, but his defense did end up helping Tulsa get to 8-6. So it'll be interesting to see what Benny Martin can do with this type of opportunity, as he'll look to rebuild one of the worst teams in college football here in year 2 of the NCSL. But the most difficult part of any singular offseason is having to say goodbye to maybe the more memorable players that played in the NCSL, maybe not only in year number 2 specifically, but in the entire series so far. And you can see from this list, there is a lot of very good football players that are going to be looking to cement themselves and their legacies in future endeavors, whether that is in the NFL or in other opportunities in life. Now, I'm not going to show you every single player that is going to the NFL or by that matter, but we'll show you the notable guys that are going to the NFL or are going to enter the transfer portal, or even guys that are choosing to stay for another year, surprisingly, even though they are good enough to go to the NFL. So we'll go ahead and dive right into that, starting with the most important position that we have is the quarterback position. In the quarterback position, there are 2 first-round projected guys. That is Curtis West, which we're not surprised about. He was the only 99 overall in this Dynasty file, playing at the University of Alabama. It led Alabama to a top 10 ranking leading into bowl season. But then the other guy was Lance Pope from Washington State. He had a very good career at Washington State. 77 touchdowns, 46 interceptions. NFL scouts really love his physical tools in terms of what he brings with his arm, so that's why he's getting that first round consideration specifically. Meanwhile, for the halfback position, there's a few guys of note here. Akeem Edwards was considered one of the best running backs in college football, hailing from Charlotte. He's a 98 overall, the Charlotte tailback. Very good 2 years in the NCSL, had 20 rushing touchdowns over the last 2 years, so he is a projected first-round pick. And then we also have another running back from Charlotte, Scott Lacey, so 49ers might be a little light on running backs coming into next season, but both of these guys could be drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, which is crazy to think about. And then Adam Williams was in the Heisman Trophy consideration as well. He's a running back from the University of Georgia. For wide receivers, there's 4 guys to definitely keep your eye on at the NFL level for sure. First is Freddie Warren, the wide receiver out of USC. He's from Vallejo, California. Dude ended up with 1,200 yards of total offense, plus 8 receiving touchdowns, rushing yards lines. He did not find the end zone through the air either. We have Zach Grigsby, who was the Blinikoff winner. He played at Georgia. We know how good he is. Adam Lamb, the senior wide receiver from Alabama, one of Curtis West's favorite targets. He's also getting first-round consideration as well. And Jeff Evans, another wide receiver from USC. This Trojan team was certainly filled with talent, and I think it's going to show on draft night as well. Looking to see multiple first-round guys having their names called from USC. So a tight end, there actually is only one tight end that is getting first round consideration right now. That is Ken Robertson out of LSU. The senior out of Tallahassee, Florida, had 500 yards and a touchdown, but is a very athletic tight end, coming with 82 speed. Also has some pretty good hands as well, and can get away from defenders if need be. A very intriguing prospect as he is, and very athletic person at the tight end position. For your offensive lineman, got a couple guys of consideration here, as we have DJ Scholler out of Arkansas first and foremost. And then we also have Johnny Anderson, the senior out of Ole Miss. As for left guards, we have one guard at the left side that is getting NFL consideration, and that is Tyrone Leslie. He is a senior from the University of Georgia and is a home state kid as well. Up next, we have the right tackles as well, and there's only one other offensive lineman that's getting that first round consideration. That is Courtney Smith, who is a former FCS guy. Well, he is a 92 overall now, and this kid was a senior at Georgia, who's looking to be one of the first 32 names called in the NFL draft, as he is projected to go in the first round. But now we go over to the defensive side of the football, and there's a little bit more depth here already, it seems like, on the defensive side. 3 left ends with first round consideration already, as Jermaine Montgomery is one of them. He's a senior out of Georgia. Drew Gilliam, the senior out of Maryland. He set a career record at Maryland for most sacks in a career. A very good college career, might I add. And Nolan Scott is here as well. He's a senior from Ohio State, hailing from Orchard Mesa, Colorado. Going to the other side of the defensive line, at the right end position, we have one first round projected player, and that is Skylar Scholler, the senior out of Cotton Grove, Minnesota. He played his college football of his previous year with the Minnesota Golden Gophers, who did make the college football playoff. As for defensive tackle, a few more first round projected guys. The first one being Chad Malloy, the senior out of LSU, who hails from Ocala, Florida. Kenny Andrews, the senior redshirt out of Northern Illinois. He's from Port Huron, Michigan. Northern Illinois, and building its program up slowly but surely. And then Scott Morris, the senior out of Tennessee. He was also named All-American, hailing from Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Up next is the linebackers, and we'll start with the left outside linebacker positions. There's a couple of guys of note. One is Ronald Wilson, the senior redshirt out of Penn State. He hails from Clifton, New Jersey, but the prospect to watch here is Antonio Jackson. He's a senior redshirt out of USC, hailing from Dana Point, California. He's a 98 overall, looking to be a day one impact for whichever NFL team decides to draft him. As for the middle linebacker position, there's one projected first-round guy over here as well, and that is Graham Davis. He's a senior redshirt from the Army Military Academy, hailing from Scotch Plains, New Jersey. If he can get an exception to defer his service from the Department of Defense, he could be making a lot of money and a lot of people happy in the NFL as well. But now we go to the corners, and there's a few corners to certainly keep an eye out moving forward. Luke Porter being one of them. He's a senior redshirt out of Orland Park, Illinois. He was one of the defensive captains on the Penn State team that made the college football playoff. In other news, Doug Smith is a first-round projected corner as well. He was a defensive captain for the Thundering Herd this past season. And out of Washington, D.C., he'll look to be one of the highest players drafted ever out of Marshall. And then rounding out your corners is Eric Collins, the senior out of Laguna Hills, California. Eric Collins was named an All-American this past season for the USC Trojans. As for the free safety position, there's only one free safety of note that you guys need to worry about for right now. David Parker, who also happened to play for the USC Trojans and was a defensive captain on the national championship team. And finally, wrapping up your major skill players that are leaving for the NFL is Nick Allen. He is a senior redshirt for Ohio State and was also the winner of the Jim Forpay Award. So those are all of the first round notable guys, but now we'll go and check in on guys who are declaring early for the NFL draft, and I'm talking about notable guys, and also a few players that I'm surprised to see stay for another year of college eligibility. First and foremost, we have Lance Vincent, the junior redshirt out of the University of Miami, the one that's up in Ohio. He's a 92 overall, and he will forego his senior year in order to give the NFL a shot. He is a 92 overall, a powerful player who hails from Lucer, Ohio. Miami is certainly going to miss him in year number 3. They need another running back to step up. Now, a few other players that are projected to go in the 7th round, but certainly have some skill. Lamar Cobb is one of them. He had a solid year at Georgia. He's from Chickasaw, Alabama, and he's projected to go in the 7th round. Speaking of offensive weapons, Tyrone Fields is forgoing his senior year as well. He played his past season at San Jose State. He'll pull that big upset off against Auburn back in, I believe it was week number 2. Tyrone Fields is from Semi Valley, California, and he's forgoing his senior year as well. And then on the offensive line, Louis McCoy out of the University of North Carolina. He's from Brighton, Alabama, and the center will be forgoing his senior year. He is a 93 overall. But now we go to a few guys that I'm really curious to see, that I'm interested to see, their reasonings for staying for the senior year, because I believe that they're ready for the NFL right now. Nobody notable jumping into the transfer portal this time around, but we do have AJ Cronin from Maryland to start out. He's a junior redshirt coming off of a pretty good year where he had 54 pancakes versus allowing 7 sacks. He's staying for his senior year, and that's a big boost for that Maryland offensive line going into year number 3. And then Marcus Amos, he was the backup quarterback for Miami. He was sitting behind Casey Carter. He could have gone to the NFL as well. He has the physical tools, even though he hasn't played much in his college career. Only has 36 pass attempts to his name, but he is staying for his senior year because he wants to prove what he can do as the starting quarterback, and then also trying to boost that draft stock with his last year of college eligibility. Speaking of guys who was surprised to see stay is Andre Engel. He's the junior redshirt from the team up north. He's from Sunrise, Florida, and had a great year as well. 42 pancakes and 3 sacks, but wants to try to run it back to win a national championship. And that's a big reason for him staying. Speaking of guys that are staying, a big stay for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They look to get back to the college football playoff. They'll have one of their defensive leaders in Matt Brady. He was a true junior at the University of Nebraska. Dude that made a lot of plays for the Cornhuskers. Had 4 interceptions, 8 pass breakups as well. Dude was a contributor since day 1, and now they'll have him for one last ride. Speaking of guys that are staying for one last ride, Irvin Gutierrez, the safety out of USC. Dude, and I believe, did he lead the nation in? Yes, this is the same guy that led the nation in total tackles last season. Dude was just all over the field. It's not because the USC defense was bad by any means, but Gutierrez flew all over the field, and instead of going to the NFL, he's staying for his senior year to also try to boost his draft stock and trying to help USC become a dynasty here in year number 3. So we did go ahead and make it through the recruiting season. And while I'm not going to read through the entire recruiting rankings that we have here in the year 2 offseason of the NCSL, one thing that I will end up doing is I'm going to go through the rankings of the top 25 teams and what those teams did during the regular season this past season, as well as look for some other notable teams, like if there's any conference champions or college football playoff teams that are outside of the top 25. So first thing that I noticed right away was that we don't have a dominating recruiting class like we saw with USC's year 1 class. USC brought in like 7 5-star players, and we don't really get that this time around. We got Michigan, who ends up with the number 1 class in America. They only signed 1 5-star guy, but most of the players that they did bring in, though, were blue chip caliber players. In terms of other top 25 classes that we have going on here, we have Miami, who brought in multiple 5-star players, both at the wide receiver position. Miami did make it to the college football playoff once again, but they did fail to repeat. However, Alabama was a team that did not make the college football playoff, but was ranked in the top 10 going into bowl season. They signed a number 3 class in America. They signed 1 5-star at the athlete position. USC, your defending national champion, signs the number 4 recruiting class in America. They're surprisingly a 5-star school instead of a 6-star, which is really interesting to me, but they signed 2 5-star players. Ohio State at number 5. They nearly won the national championship, but folded like a lawn chair. But they should be back in the running for a national championship with this kind of recruiting class. Texas, while they didn't bring any 5-star players, they brought in 7 blue chip guys, which was good for number 6 in the recruiting rankings. Oregon State had a really tough season this past year, but will be looking to bounce back, as they did end up bringing 9 4-star players. That helps them get to number 7. Ole Miss went to the college football playoff, but was bounced in the semifinals by Ohio State. They signed a number 8 class in America. Speaking of teams that lost in the college football playoff, Georgia in there as well. They were a 99 overall team, but lost in the first round to Ohio State. They still signed a top 10 class. As for Washington, the Washington Huskies signed a number 10 class in America. 10-4 season, a good season for Washington for sure. Washington did finish with a Holiday Bowl victory over Virginia Tech. As for Notre Dame looks to revive the brand as they sign a strong class with their 17 players, 8 of them being blue chip caliber guys, and Notre Dame with the number 11 class looks to lead the MAC back into relevancy. As for Iowa is number 12 in America with their recruiting class. A good group of guys overall, as 6 of them are blue chip players. Iowa nearly making it to the American Conference Championship this year, but did fall short as they did lose the tiebreaker to Bowling Green. Auburn was an up-and-down team this season, the type of team that you would see pop in and out of the top 25, but the number 13 recruiting class is something that they are certainly happy about, half of them being blue chippers. 14 is LSU. They have a Independence Bowl victory over Washington State. While they are overall disappointing in the regular season, their recruiting class should keep them competitive moving forward, 6 out of 18 being blue chip players. Navy with a surprisingly good class. They end up with the number 15 overall recruiting class in the country. Navy did end up 7-6 with a New Mexico Bowl victory over Eastern Michigan. Navy did not qualify for a bowl game even though they met the criteria, but they should have a stronger season next year as they do finish with the number 16 recruiting class in the country. Pittsburgh, we saw them really struggle after their loss to UCLA early in the regular season. They went just 2-7 after that game, but Pitt does sign a top 25 class somehow through all of that, which surprises me. Wisconsin, who made the college football playoff back in year number 1, signs the number 18 class in America. They had 21 players total signed, and 5 of them being 4-star guys. Florida State does sign the number 19 class. They finished in the top 25 with a strong finish, including a Ruella Quest Bowl victory over Miami of Ohio. Oregon with a top 25 recruiting class to go with their top 25 overall team as they look to keep pace in the Pac-12. They did manage to sign 2 5-star players, both that are athletes. Very athlete-driven recruiting class, as 4 of them are like that at the University of Oregon. They're going to be looking to climb up in the Pac-12 hierarchy. At 21, speaking of the Pac-12, is UCLA, trying their best to keep up with USC, which is right down the street from them. While this is not the same caliber of class that USC brought in, still a great class by UCLA, and they did win the Las Vegas Bowl against a fellow ranked team at the time in BYU. At number 22 is Nebraska, and this is where we find a new offensive coordinator, George Gentry. He comes from Hawaii. He'll be having a pretty good team, I would think, as they do sign a 5-star in the athlete Haris Grant, who's 5'11", 175, so a lot more talent overall, should be deeper than what he had to work with at Hawaii. At 23 is Minnesota, who made it to the semifinals of the college football playoff. They signed the number 23 overall class in the country. 24 is Florida. The Florida Gators resurge after a tough season 1. They did end up losing in the Gasparilla Bowl to the Michigan Wolverines. And rounding out your top 25 is the TCU Horned Frogs, which despite not making a bowl game, they should be better next season with this kind of recruiting class coming through the door. Other notable recruiting classes that I wanted to talk about real quick is Penn State. They actually finished just outside of the top 25. They did go to the college football playoff and lost to USC, but they were also champions of Conference USA to go with that as well. Not a bad recruiting class that Penn State ended up bringing in. As for the Tennessee Volunteers, they don't bring in a shabby recruiting class themselves, as they finished 35th overall, which is not terrible, but you would like to see Tennessee recruit just a little bit higher given their history. Also a program that did win the MAC conference and looking to try to make the MAC a little bit more relevant here in year number 3. As for BYU, they finished with the number 44 recruiting class in the nation, and they're coming off of a great season for them. While they lost in the Las Vegas Bowl to UCLA, they did win the Mountain West, playing against another top 25 team at the time in UNLV. Now, this was a little bit of a surprise too, as the Clemson Tigers did not recruit as well as I would expect them to recruit at, right? So they finished with the number 60 recruiting class in the country, which is a little disgusting to look at, to be honest. They had a great season. They were champions of the ACC, and they also won the Ruel Quest Bowl game, or the First Responders Bowl game against Rice to end the season. So a great end to the season. Just didn't translate that into great recruiting necessarily, as they didn't sign any blue chip players. Now, at this point, you guys are probably wondering how you guys can get more involved in the NCSL series. Well, you can actually get involved in a multitude of ways, actually. You can be either a custom player where you can handpick where you go and start your college career, and we can track to see if your guy cuts out to be that quality college player or kind of fizzles out. Or you can even be a coordinator to start out at a smaller school and try to work your way up through the coaching ranks. For both being a custom player as well as being a custom coach, I do have templates in the pinned comment, so there will be a separate template for whether you want to be a custom player or if you want to be a custom coach. And if that is something that does interest you guys, I would definitely recommend checking that out down in the comment section. But if you want to have more advanced notice so that you're more likely to get a custom player or a custom coach at a place that you want, then I would definitely recommend doing one of two things, or even both if it tickles your pickle. You can either join my Discord, which is linked in the description down below, or in that same description, you can even join my channel membership program. And while neither is required in order to enjoy my content, it does support me in a more personal way, and as all of the revenues do go towards being a part of the this YouTube production that you see here. And not to mention, you guys get some pretty cool perks as well down the line, so definitely check that out if that's something that interests you. That is going to wrap things up for the off-season piece of the NCSL here on College Football Revamp, more specifically on NCAA 14. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button for me, and then also hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel and happen to like what you see here. Next episode, we will have the preview to season number 3. We'll take a look at the preseason top 25. We'll also dive into the each of the individual conferences, maybe give our predictions to who I think personally is going to win the conference. And of course, we're going to review those custom players and custom coaches that you guys introduce into the series. So it will be more for you guys than anything. And we'll wrap it up and put a nice little bow tie on it by taking a look at some of the premium games to look out for in week number 1. So I'm really excited about this next episode. I hope you guys are as well. If you are, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button for me. Hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel. This is John J Gaming on the mic signing off, but I'm hoping you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.